Have you ever poured your entire soul into something? I mean, every late night, every drop of sweat, every dream, you stitch it all into a single, beautiful creation. You think that creation is your future. But what happens when the people who are supposed to love you the most decide to burn that future to the ground? Stick around, because this isn't just a story about betrayal. It's a story about how I took the ashes they left me, and built an empire. My name is Arya, and for a while, I thought I had it all. At 28, I was an up-and-coming textile designer in Milan. Not one of the big names, not yet. I was the girl with a small studio, a big imagination, and a love for fabrics that felt alive. My specialty was a unique botanical dyeing process I'd developed myself, a secret method that created colors so vibrant, they seemed to breathe. My husband, Marcus, he was handsome. He was an art curator from a family with old money and even older connections. When we met, I was mesmerized. He spoke of art and beauty with such passion. He seemed to see the artist in me when no one else did. Looking back, I realize he wasn't looking at an artist. He was looking at a potential acquisition. A pretty, talented little thing to add to his collection. The problem with my art is that it started to get more attention than his. While he was curating minor exhibitions for his family's gallery, I was getting whispers of recognition in Vogue Italia. My fabrics were my children. Each one was a story. The deep indigo from fermented woad, a story of patience. The fiery saffron yellow, a story of passion. But lately, my stories were turning into tragedies. It started small. So small, I thought I was going crazy. Picture this, I'm working on a commissioned piece, a wedding gown, with silk I'd spent a month dyeing to the perfect shade of dawn blush. I leave for lunch, and when I return, a huge, ugly chemical bleach stain has eaten right through the bodice. It looked like an accident. A clumsy spill. Marcus was right there, all sympathetic. "Oh, darling, how awful. You must have knocked over the cleaning solution." I never keep cleaning solutions near my work table. Ever. But I let it go. Then, a few weeks later, a bolt of priceless antique lace I'd sourced for a client, vanished. Just gone. Marcus helped me search for it for hours, his face a perfect mask of concern. It must have been misplaced in the delivery, he'd suggested. These things happen. But they were happening a lot. And they were happening at the worst possible times, always right before a major deadline, always costing me a client or a piece of my reputation. Marcus's comfort started to feel hollow. Like a beautifully carved, empty box. The real antagonist, though, wasn't just my husband's fragile ego. It was Cassandra. Cassandra Vancroft. Heir to the Vancroft fashion empire. She was everything I wasn't, tall, icy, born with a silver spoon so far down her throat she probably choked on it as a baby. Her designs were technically perfect but creatively dead. They were clothes for people who were afraid to feel anything. And she hated me. She hated that this no-name designer with dirt under her fingernails was being called the future of Milanese textiles. Marcus, of course, was old family friends with the Vancrofts. "You should see her as a mentor, Arya," he'd say. "Cassandra knows the business." What I knew was that every time Cassandra was near my work, something went wrong. She'd accidentally spill an espresso near a mood board. She'd offer friendly advice that would send me down a 3-week-long dead end. She was a smiling cobra, and my husband was practically holding the basket. The breaking point, or what I thought was the breaking point, came with the Vanguard Gala. It's the Met Gala of Europe. Getting an invitation to design for it can make your career. and against all odds, they chose me. Not Vancroft. Me. I was commissioned to create the centerpiece gown for the Gardens of Myth theme. It was my dream. My magnum opus. I remember crying with joy when I got the call. Marcus hugged me, but it felt like holding a mannequin. The first person he called to share the good news was Cassandra. I could hear his hushed tones from the other room. It made my stomach clench. A week later, Cassandra called me. Her voice was pure saccharine. "Arya, darling. I heard the news. I'm so thrilled for you. In fact, Marcus and I think we should all celebrate. Why don't you come to my atelier? We can discuss a collaboration. A way for the House of Vancroft to support a rising star like you. A collaboration. With her." It was the last thing I wanted. But Marcus insisted. "Don't be difficult, Arya. This is a huge opportunity. You can't afford to be seen as ungrateful." So I went. Cassandra's atelier was a temple of sterile minimalism. All white marble, glass, and cold, silent assistants who moved like ghosts. Marcus was already there, sipping something from a tiny, elegant glass. He looked more at home there than he ever did in our cozy, chaotic apartment. "Arya. You made it," Cassandra purred, gliding towards me. She looked me up and down, a faint sneer playing on her lips. "We're so proud." To celebrate, I had my nutritionist prepare a special wellness elixir. "A toast to your success." She handed me a small, heavy glass filled with a pearlescent, lavender-colored liquid. It smelled faintly of elderflower and something else. Something sharp and metallic, like burnt wires. It pricked at the back of my throat. Marcus raised his glass. "To Arya." Cassandra smiled, and her eyes, her cold, calculating eyes, met mine. "To Arya," she echoed. But her smile never reached them. It was the same dead-eyed smile I'd seen every time one of my projects was mysteriously ruined. My heart was hammering against my ribs. My instincts, the same ones that told me which plants would bleed color and which would hold fast, were screaming. This was a trap. This was the bleach stain and the missing lace, all in a pretty glass. My hands were shaking. I needed to think. "Oh, this looks divine," I said, my voice trembling slightly. I brought the glass halfway to my lips, then stopped, feigning a sudden thought. "Actually, Cassandra, before we toast, I brought something for you." I reached into my bag and pulled out a small swatch of fabric, a new silk I'd dyed. It shimmered with an impossible, iridescent color, like a captured sunset. "It's a sample of the main fabric for the gala gown. I wanted your opinion." It worked. Her professional vanity was her weakness. Her eyes, which had been locked on me, darted to the fabric. Marcus leaned in to look, too. For a split second, they were both distracted. It was all the time I needed. My glass was on the small marble table next to hers. With a swift, practiced movement, the kind of sleight of hand you learn from years of handling delicate materials, I switched them. My hand brushed against her glass as I set the fabric down. It was a tiny, fluid motion. Indetectable. "I'm so sorry, I'm such a klutz today," I mumbled, steadying the glasses. Cassandra barely registered it. She was still staring at the fabric, her mind already dissecting it, envying it. "It's impressive," she said, her voice tight. "Now," I said, picking up what was now my glass, the one she was meant to drink. "To success." I watched, my breath caught in my throat, as Cassandra picked up her glass, the one filled with her special poison, and took a delicate, triumphant sip. Marcus watched her, a flicker of something, anticipation? In his eyes. They thought they had me. They had no idea I'd just handed them the weapon they'd built to destroy me. I didn't know what was in that drink, but I knew I was about to find out. For a few minutes, nothing happened. We made stilted conversation about the gala. I watched Cassandra, pretending to sip from my own glass. Then, I saw it. A faint pinkness blooming on her neck. She subtly scratched at it. A moment later, she cleared her throat, a dry, rasping sound. "Are you all right, Cassandra?" Marcus asked, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Fine," she snapped, her voice suddenly hoarse. "Just a bit warm in here." She took another, larger gulp of the elixir. A mistake. Her hand, the one holding the glass, started to tremble. A blotchy, angry red rash was now crawling up from her collarbones, spreading across her porcelain skin like a hideous vine. She looked at her hand in horror, then at the glass. Then, at me. And in her eyes, I saw a dawning, panicked realization. "Marcus," she rasped, her breath coming in short, shallow puffs. What was in this?" Marcus stared at her, then at the identical glass in my hand, then back at her. The color drained from his face. He looked like a man who had just watched his sure bet collapse at the finish line. That was for. He couldn't even say it. I stood up, my own hands now steady as a rock. "That was for me, wasn't it?" I asked, my voice quiet but carrying across the cold, silent room. "Just like the bleach on the wedding dress. And the lace that disappeared. You were trying to make me sick. To make me miss the gala." Cassandra was struggling to breathe now, clawing at her throat as angry red hives erupted on her face. Call a doctor," she wheezed, her eyes wide with terror. Marcus fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking too badly to dial. I just stood there and watched. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel anger. I felt a strange, cold clarity. This was the proof. This was the core wound, laid bare for me to see. My husband, the man I loved, had just tried to poison me to placate his jealous rival. My marriage was over. My trust was shattered. But my fight was just beginning. I didn't call an ambulance for Cassandra. Marcus eventually managed it, his hands trembling as he stammered their address into the phone. I just walked out. I left the Vancroft atelier, left my husband stammering pathetic excuses, and walked into the Milanese evening. I didn't look back. The first few weeks were a blur of gray. I packed a bag from our apartment while Marcus was at the hospital with his partner in crime. I took my sketchbooks, my dye recipes, my sewing machine, and the clothes on my back. I left my wedding ring on the empty pillow beside mine. It was a quiet, final statement. I was homeless, heartbroken, and my career-defining project, the Vanguard Gala gown, was now a monument to my own naivete. The organizers called, of course. Marcus and Cassandra had spun a story, a sudden, severe allergic reaction on Cassandra's part and my own, emotional instability that made me unfit to handle the pressure. They regretfully informed me that they were postponing my involvement. A soft firing. I was out. I was broken. For a few days, I let myself be. I stayed in a cheap hotel, living off stale croissants and bitter coffee, feeling the full weight of the betrayal. They hadn't just tried to hurt my body, they'd tried to poison my name, my art, my very spirit. And they had almost succeeded. But the thing about being a designer, a creator, is that you can't stand the sight of a blank page for long. My sketchbook called to me. The feeling of charcoal on paper, the familiar scent of my fabrics, it was the only home I had left. The anger started to burn away the grief, forging it into something hard and sharp, resolve. I needed help. I needed a fortress. And in Milan, there was only one person I could think of. Lorenzo. Lorenzo was a legend. A master tailor who had been the head of pattern making at Vanguard back when Cassandra's father ran the house, back when it still had a soul. He'd left in disgust when Cassandra took over, trading the pristine atelier for a cluttered, dusty workshop in the Altrarno district, a place where real artisans still worked. He was old, grizzled, and had a reputation for not suffering fools. I showed up at his door, unannounced, looking like a ghost. He opened it a crack, his eyes, sharp as his needles, taking in my disheveled appearance. "What do you want?" he grunted. My voice failed me. I just held out my sketchbook. My hands were shaking again. He snatched it from me, flipped through the pages with a critical eye. He saw the sketches for the gala gown, the detailed notes on my botanical dyes, the frantic, newer sketches I'd made in my hotel room, darker, fiercer designs. He was silent for a full minute. I thought he was going to slam the door in my face. Instead, he just grunted again. "So, the little viper and her pet finally bit you, eh?" I wondered when it would happen. He opened the door wider. "Get in. You're tracking misery all over my doorstep." Lorenzo's workshop was my sanctuary. It was chaos, but it was a beautiful, creative chaos. Bolts of vintage fabric were stacked to the ceiling, ancient sewing machines stood like sentinels, and the air smelled of chalk, hot irons, and old wool. He cleared a corner for me, gave me a cot in the back, and fed me pasta he made on a hot plate. He didn't offer sympathy. He offered something better, work. "Your colors are good," he said, tapping a page in my dye journal. "But your structure is weak. Your seams are for show, not for strength. You build a dress like you built your life, pretty on the outside, but it falls apart under pressure. We're going to fix that." And so began my real education. Lorenzo was a brutal teacher. He made me unlearn everything I thought I knew. He had me spend a week just sewing straight lines on scrap muslin. He taught me about boning, about corsetry, about how to build a garment that could stand on its own. He called my secret dye formulas my only real asset, and helped me document them, even suggesting ways to make the colors more permanent, more resilient. "In this business," he'd say, his voice a low rumble over the whir of a sewing machine, "beauty is not enough. You must have iron in your spine, and in your seams." During that time, I did some research. I sent a sample of the ruined wedding dress fabric to a friend of a friend who worked in a textile lab. The report came back with a finding that made my blood run cold. It wasn't bleach. It was a mild, slow-acting corrosive agent, a type of phthalate used in industrial plasticizers. It was designed to weaken natural fibers over time. It was deliberate. It was sophisticated. And the wellness elixir? A quick search on the symptoms, dermatitis, hives, respiratory distress, pointed to a concentrated form of a chemical found in poison ivy, but synthesized to be more potent and harder to trace. It wouldn't kill you. It would just incapacitate you, make you look sick, unreliable, and hysterical. It was Cassandra's signature, all over again, technically perfect, soullessly cruel. I wasn't just a victim of jealousy anymore. I was the subject of a cold, calculated experiment. Lorenzo saw the fire in my eyes when I told him. He just nodded grimly. "Good. Now you know who you're fighting. Now, stop crying and start designing. Revenge is a dish best served on the runway." With Lorenzo as my mentor and my rage as my fuel, I began to create. My new designs were different. They still had my vibrant, living colors, but now they had structure. They had strength. They were beautiful, but they were also armor. I started a small, private Instagram account, posting photos of my work, shot against the gritty backdrop of Lorenzo's workshop. I wrote captions about resilience, about the art of repair, about finding beauty in the broken things. I was forging my weapons. And I was getting stronger every single day. The first ripple of change came from the internet. My small, anonymous Instagram account started getting attention. Not from the big magazines, but from fashion bloggers and indie-style influencers who were tired of the sterile perfection of houses like Vancroft. They loved the story, the raw honesty of my work. They called my new style a brutal chic. One blogger in particular, a Parisian firecracker named Simone, became my champion. She had a massive following and a sharp tongue. She did a whole feature on my secret workshop and my resilient designs, hailing me as the antidote to the soulless fast fashion machine. That post got me an offer to show a small capsule collection at an independent fashion week event in Florence. It was a tiny venue, a shoestring budget, but it was a stage. It was a chance. Lorenzo was stoic. "Don't get cocky," he grumbled, though I saw a hint of a smile in his eyes. "And reinforce those seams." Of course, Cassandra and Marcus heard about it. They actually showed up. They stood at the back of the crowded room, Cassandra in a pristine white suit, Marcus hovering behind her like a well-dressed ghost. They thought they were coming to a funeral. They wanted to see me fail, to confirm to themselves that I was nothing without them. I saw them right before my first model was about to walk. And I saw the stagehand, a man I'd never seen before, lingering near the lighting rig above the runway, holding a small, dark bottle. A split second of pure, cold panic shot through me. They were going to try something. Sabotage the lights? Spill something on the runway? But this time, I was ready. I'd learned from Lorenzo. I had a contingency plan for everything. I walked calmly over to my own lighting tech. "Cue sequence beta, now," I whispered. He nodded. The main runway lights dimmed, and a single, powerful spotlight I'd positioned from the side blasted onto the catwalk, completely changing the lighting scheme. The stagehand at the main rig was caught off guard, fumbling with his bottle. He'd missed his chance. I saw Cassandra's face in the crowd tighten with fury. She shot a venomous look at Marcus, who just shrank back into the shadows. My show was a success. The clothes, my armor, gleamed under the new lights. The audience loved it. Simone live-streamed the whole thing, her commentary sparkling with praise. "This is not a comeback," she declared to her followers. "This is a resurrection." The biggest victory, though, came a week later. I received an email with the subject line, "Vanguard Gala, an apology and an offer." The head of the gala committee had seen Simone's stream. He'd heard the buzz. He wrote that there had been a gross misjudgment, and that my tenacity and extraordinary new work had convinced them to reverse their decision. They couldn't give me the centerpiece slot back. Cassandra had already snatched it, but they wanted to offer me a spot in the Emerging Designers Showcase, a prestigious platform on the same night. I read the email 3 times. My hands were shaking, but this time, it was with adrenaline, not fear. This was it. The same stage. The same night. I showed the email to Lorenzo. He read it, his expression unreadable. Then he looked at me. "So, little bird," he said, his voice serious. "Are you going to sing? Or are you going to hunt?" A slow, cold smile spread across my face. "I'm going to do both." I knew they would not let me have this. They would see this as the ultimate affront, me rising from the ashes to share their spotlight. They would try to destroy me, once and for all. And I was going to let them. My plan began to form, intricate and sharp as a dress pattern. I would not just win. I would orchestrate their downfall using the very tools they had taught me to fear. First, I accepted the offer, very publicly. I gave an exclusive interview to Simone, talking about my original vision for the gala. I described my initial designs, the ones from my old sketchbook, the ones Cassandra and Marcus had seen, in loving detail. I announced I would be recreating them for the showcase. I was laying the most beautiful, tempting piece of bait. Next, I rented a small, temporary studio space, separate from Lorenzo's workshop. I filled it with cheap fabrics and half-finished versions of my old designs. I made sure Marcus knew where it was, dropping a casual mention of the address in an email to a mutual acquaintance I knew he monitored. This would be my stage. And the final act was about to begin. The week before the Vanguard Gala was the longest week of my life. Lorenzo and I worked in secret, in the sanctuary of his real workshop, creating my true collection. It was a masterpiece. The fabrics were my new, resilient creations, the colors were deep and defiant, and the structures were strong, like armor. It was a collection that told my story without saying a word. Meanwhile, I made a show of working late at my bait studio. I installed tiny, high-definition spy cameras, the kind used for home security, hidden in air vents and light fixtures. I was counting on their arrogance. Their belief that I was still the same naive girl they'd tried to crush. 2 nights before the gala, it happened. The motion sensor on the cameras pinged my phone. I watched, my heart pounding, as the live feed showed a shadowy figure picking the lock. It was Marcus. He moved through the studio with a guilty haste, his expensive shoes silent on the concrete floor. He went straight for the rack of gowns, my decoy collection. He pulled out a small, lead-lined bottle from his coat pocket. It was the same industrial corrosive he'd used on the wedding dress, but I knew this time, the concentration would be much higher. I watched him meticulously, methodically, spray a fine, almost invisible mist onto each and every garment. He was careful, precise, and utterly ruthless. He was destroying my life's work, and the look on his face was one of grim satisfaction. He was erasing me. When he was done, he slipped out, and the studio was silent again. I had it all. Crystal clear video. I forwarded a copy to Simone with a simple message, "Get ready." The next day, the final piece of their trap, and mine, snapped into place. I received a frantic call from the gala organizers. Cassandra, citing a conflict of interest and unprofessional conduct, had used her family's immense influence as a primary sponsor to have my showcase spot revoked. It was the final nail they thought they were putting in my coffin. Then came the press release from House Bancroft. It was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive cruelty. It announced that, in a gesture of magnanimity, Cassandra Bancroft would be presenting a special tribute collection to honor troubled young artists. She had, the release said, acquired and completed my original designs to realize the vision I was unable to see through myself. She had stolen my work. The work her lover had just doused in a fabric-eating chemical. They thought they had won. They thought they had taken everything. They had just walked into the center of my stage. The night of the Vanguard Gala arrived. The air was electric. I wasn't there as a designer. I was there as Lorenzo's guest, dressed in a simple, elegant black gown of my own making. We sat in the audience, far from the front row, just 2 anonymous faces in a sea of fashion royalty. Simone was positioned with the press, her phone ready. Cassandra's show was the grand finale. The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. The music began, a haunting, tragic melody. The Vanguard logo appeared on the giant screens behind the runway, then faded. The first model walked out. She was wearing my sunset-colored silk gown. It was breathtaking. For a horrifying second, my heart seized. Had they somehow fixed it? But then, under the intense heat of the runway lights, I saw it. A tiny patch on the shoulder, near the seam, was starting to look damp. The color was bleeding, turning a sick, grayish-brown. The second model emerged. The third. The fourth. Each in one of my stolen designs. And on each one, the chemical catalyst, the heat from the lights, was working its magic. The vibrant botanical dyes began to warp and run. The strong silk fibers began to weaken. A seam on one dress split open at the hip as the model turned. A strap on another gown, now brittle, snapped, the bodice slumping awkwardly. The audience started murmuring, confused. Was this part of the show? Some bizarre deconstructionist statement? Cassandra stood near the entrance of the runway, a triumphant smirk on her face. She thought this was her victory. She hadn't realized the true nature of the poison Marcus had used. It wasn't just corrosive. The phthalates, when heated, released a mild but persistent skin irritant. The models started to itch. First subtly, then frantically. One scratched her arm, leaving red welts. Another's face broke out in blotchy hives. The professional poise crumbled, replaced by panicked discomfort. The beautiful, tragic procession devolved into a chaotic, agonizing mess. My stolen dreams were literally dissolving on the runway. The audience gasped. The murmurs turned to horrified whispers. Cassandra's smirk froze, then melted into a mask of pure, unadulterated horror as she realized what was happening. And at that exact moment, bam! The giant screens behind the runway, which had been showing the Vanguard logo, flickered and changed. And there, 10 feet high, was the crystal-clear security footage of Marcus, his face illuminated by the studio lights, meticulously poisoning each and every dress. The audio kicked in, a text message conversation superimposed on the screen. Cassandra, did you handle it? All of it? Marcus, done. They're ruined. She won't recover from this. Cassandra, good. Her little comeback ends tonight. Forever. A collective, horrified gasp went through the hall. All eyes snapped from the melting dresses on the runway to the damning evidence on the screen, then to Cassandra, whose face was as white as her marble atelier. She looked at Marcus, who was sitting in the front row, his face a picture of absolute ruin. Simone's live feed was capturing it all, her whispered, shocked commentary narrating the downfall to hundreds of thousands of viewers online. We are witnessing the most spectacular self-destruction in fashion history. The show was over. The lights came up, revealing the full, glorious carnage. And then, a new piece of music began. It was powerful, resilient, and full of hope. The screens changed again, this time to show my name. Aria. From the side of the stage, my first model walked out. She was wearing my real collection. A gown of deep, defiant indigo, with a structure as strong and beautiful as a cathedral. Then another, and another. My army of survivors. My armored angels. I walked out behind them, into the spotlight, and the stunned silence of the hall erupted into a deafening, thunderous wave of applause. I found Lorenzo's eyes in the crowd. He was standing, a single, proud tear tracing a path through the wrinkles on his cheek. I had not just survived. I had won. My revenge wasn't just in their exposure, their humiliation, their inevitable legal and financial ruin. My revenge was in my art. It was in the fact that I was still standing, still creating, while they were buried under the rubble of their own hatred. 1 year later, I'm standing in my own atelier. It's not cold and white like Cassandra's, it's warm, filled with light, music, and the beautiful chaos of creation. The House of Vancroft is bankrupt, buried in lawsuits. Marcus and Cassandra are social pariahs, their names now a punchline in the industry they once ruled. Sometimes, I think about that night. The broken dresses, the panicked faces. But I don't feel anger anymore. I just feel quiet. The best revenge, I've learned, isn't loud and explosive. It's the quiet, steady, unbreakable act of building a better life on the wreckage of the one someone tried to take from you. It's showing them that they couldn't destroy you. They just cleared the way for you to become who you were always meant to be. Thank you for listening to my story. It's crazy how life can turn out, right? If you've ever had to fight back against someone who tried to hold you down, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your stories of resilience. And if you enjoyed this, please don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more stories, and ring that notification bell. It really does help. Until next time, remember to be the artist of your own life. Don't let anyone else hold the brush.